either take them going through the presentation or at the end. They can let us know on that. Right, it is in, recording. Right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Economy and Infrastructure Policy. Date is 18th of March. Any apologies, Sam?
No apologies, Chair.
Right, Joe. Received any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interests?
Chair, can I ask, because there are some of these houses in my ward, do I have to declare an interest?
In my opinion, it's not. The matter isn't something that you would need to declare on, Councillor.
No, yeah, sorry,
Thanks.
legal as well, that's fine.
Yeah, there we are. Let's go for the item 3 is approve and sign the minutes of the previous meeting. For accuracy, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, and page 6, page 7, and 8. I did hear somebody say move.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'll second
I
that.
did.
Any comments on the? No. Okay. First of all, I'd like to welcome the Cabinet member and the officers for attending today. Going to item 4. Would the Cabinet member like to make an opening statement?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the invitation. I know that there will be a comprehensive introduction from the officers. Perhaps, if it's permissible, I come in at the end and let the officers lead on this item, please.
Okay, thank you. And okay, who's presenting is it Caroline or Dave Merrick? No, Peter Jones, is it?
It'll be,
No?
be me, Chair Mark Wade. I shall actually kick us off, and then Carol and Dave are on the call as well, just so you don't have to listen to me go through all of it. I'll defer to them for part of the presentation. So if okay with you, Chair, I'll make a start.
Yes, please.
Okay, afternoon, everybody. I'm Mark Wade. I'm Head of Housing and Public Health. Here this afternoon, we're going to speak about the Council's decarbonisation and more homes processes under the title Building Better Homes and Decarbonising Our Existing Stock as well. I've mentioned colleagues on the call. David Mayrick is our Programme Planning and Delivery Manager for Council House Investment, so the existing stock. And we'll cover the detail of the decarbonisation of the existing stock in council homes. And Carol Morgan is our More Homes Development Manager, and I'll defer to Carol to deal with some of the detail on the new build schemes that we've got ongoing at the moment. So I'm going to be flicking between screens a little bit. So hopefully we'll take questions at the end, if that's okay with everybody. So if that's all right, I'll work on that basis. Similarly, work on the basis you've and the assumption that you've been able to read through the report itself. So I don't intend going through that sort of word by word or line by line. You'll be pleased to hear. There is some reference material in your pack, which I'll use as the basis of explaining the presentation this afternoon. Okay, so make a start then. Starting with the More Homes project. Number of in fact, all of you, I'm sure, will be aware of the council's return to house building after a long wait in the wings, as it were. Change in the legislation allowing us to do that, lifting of the HRA, the Housing Revenue Account borrowing cap, to put councils firmly back on the map for house building. So affordable housing is the business that we are in, and over 7,000 affordable homes are needed over the 15-year period, 2010 to 2025, and that demand is only going to go up in one way. So we have an initial plan, a 4-year plan under the More Homes project, as it's entitled, to deliver 140 properties. Will not be. You will hear me say that the ambitions are high. However, that's no surprise. So we've increased that now with Cabinet's agreement to build 1,000 homes over the 10 years to 2030. A mixed approach to that. The initial schemes being delivered by our in-house building contractor and building services, led by Nigel Williams and his team in building services. But also in terms of the scale required, plans to contract with delivery partners or a joint venture then to deliver the larger schemes on a mixed 10-year basis. So that will be subject to a procurement process this year, which I'm sure Carol will speak about later on. And similarly, the dovetail with regeneration schemes across Swansea, which we would hope will be able to include an element of new build affordable housing for those that need it locally. We've also got an acquisitions programme as well to buy back homes in areas of need. We have a lot of detailed information available about where we do need properties. So we've got a programme underway at the moment around buying properties back. Some of those are former council properties that we lost to the right to buy, but basically open market purchases to increase the stock size in an area where there is a shortfall. And Welsh Government funding support to that process is really key. More Homes journey then. Lots of, I've mentioned Welsh Government support is absolutely vital, and I won't apologise for emphasising that point today. A lot of the ambitions that we need, whilst they are supported by HRA investment and borrowing, the Welsh Government has a big role to play with helping authorities such as ourselves to develop new build properties, and also then dealing with the decarbonisation agenda anyway, which I'll come to shortly. A number of schemes that you'll be familiar with under the Welsh Government Innovative Housing Programme, the trialling of new technologies, super efficient properties to be able to provide low cost fuel bills and good quality housing at the same time for our tenants is what we're all about at the moment. Some of this new technology that colleagues will speak about is exactly that. It's new, it's in development, and the only way that we're going to be able to conclude what's best, as it were, is by trialling a number of different approaches. So you'll be familiar with our passive house pilot up in Penderry, which we completed in 2018, and it was 18 homes there. Further schemes then in Parker Helig, on also then the scheme which is on site also in Penderry at the moment with the Collier's Way 2 scheme, all part of homes as power stations. We started with passive house, moved to homes as power stations then, so there's the PV panels on the roof and the batteries. So those properties are effectively generating and storing their own power to be used on site. Again, colleagues will cover technical detail on that and know better than I do in terms of the workings of that. And further then ahead, also IHP schemes, Innovative Housing Programme schemes, are planned for developments in West Cross and Creswell Road in Clace as well, which are about to start as part of that programme of funding. All the schemes are being designed and built by the council's in-house building services team, as I've indicated, and we will have delivered over 90 homes through the IHP scheme, 18 passive house and 75 HAPs, as they're known, the homes as power stations. So at that point, that's the opening part of the presentation in relation to more homes. So I'll hand you over to Carol, who'll pick up some of the scheme detail on the subsequent slides. Carol?
Okay, I'm on slide 4 in the pack, and you can see some pictures there of the first passive house scheme, which was built by the council. As we said earlier, this was a major challenge for the council, who hadn't developed homes in decades. So they were, not only was it to get into grips with developing again, but it was, get into grips with the type of build that we were doing, and there were loads of challenges to overcome with the specialist nature of the passive house construction. a very steep learning curve because there were such stringent controls needed to achieve the required standards. You can see some pictures there of the insulated slab and the tape on all the joints. The way that house was constructed was really, really specialist. The next slide then, the picture shows the completed project up at Colliers Way 1, which was completed in 12 months, which was an incredible feat of the council working together and pulling together this scheme and handing it over to the residents. And that's a drone picture that was taken just prior to handover. So we worked with Passive House because obviously we expected to see lower fuel bills for the residents. So the claim of Passive House was that it would be 70% more efficient than current building regs. We wanted to develop on these standards, and obviously prevention of mold, condensation and cold spots, all of which, you know, would have a positive health impact on conditions that some of our residents have, such as eczema, asthma, allergies and chest conditions. And it's often a major cause of complaint in our older properties. We also working closely with the residents of Colliers Way 1 to gather their feedback on how the property actually works in reality. And we have the Welsh School of Architecture have installed some monitoring kit there, and they're doing a 3-year post-occupancy study for us on that site, so we can really see if the benefits of Passive House live up to the user expectations and the expectations that we had. We didn't repeat the Passive House journey because we then went on to develop our own Swansea standard. We wanted to build on the principles of Passive House. So the Swansea standard is a fabric first approach, as I say, based on the Passive House principles, but it's a 25% improvement on building regulation U values, and then can be combined with innovative and renewable technologies to further improve the efficiency of the properties. So we've built 2 schemes to this standard already. So the first at Parker Halig was handed over in September 2019, and the second site at Colliers Way 2 is going to be handed over in April. We've had funding, as Mark said, from the Innovative Housing Programme to bolt on renewable technologies on top of the Swansea standard to make these homes as power stations, this specification that we talk about. So the technologies that the homes have incorporated into them are ground source heat pumps. So every home has its own ground source heat pump, which is dug sort of 140 metres into the ground, and it draws out the heat. We have integrated PV solar roofs. We have Tesla batteries in each home, and each home has a mechanical ventilation heat recovery system. So all these homes, they're off gas, they use and store their own electricity. So the homes as power stations concept that we're talking about, these projects have really been pathfinders for the City Deal Homes as Power Stations project. And the Homes as Power Station project aims to support the building of 3,500 new HAPs, as we call them, across the City Deal region over the next 5 years. It also includes plans for rolling out 10,000 retrofit homes as power stations as well, and Dave will come on to talk about that a bit later. The City Deal project is aiming to develop a regional supply chain, create jobs, so they're talking about 19 construction jobs per £1 million invested in the programme. Also talking about skills and training opportunities. The regional supply chain in terms of the renewable sector will be critical about getting that developed locally. Obviously, future-proofing tenants against rising fuel costs, which we know is an issue, and obviously, contributing to carbon reduction is a major part of the project as well. So there's some pictures on the next slide of our completed project up in Parker Halig. I'm not sure how many of you have had a chance to see the completed site, Really, really impressive standard. The properties look incredible, and we have 16 residents who moved in September there. The HAPS technologies, you can see the pictures on slide 10. So each property has, as I say, a plant room in it. The plant room houses the Tesla battery, the heat pump, and the MVHR, and this all needs to be incorporated into the design of the property. You can see that the PV panels are integrated into the roofs, so they look really, really nice. And each site has its own GRP central comms hub. So there's one satellite dish on one property which serves all the sites. So we don't need to be drilling into the fabric of every property which would affect the energy efficiency of that home. So the outcomes we've been looking for in the project so far, obviously they've been designed to reduce the amount of energy used. That's the principle. So energy is generated from the sun, and then the excess energy that isn't used is stored in the Tesla battery. As I say, the homes are totally powered by electricity. There's no gas supply on any of the sites. The PV panels will generate energy during most of the day, especially in summer, and we are getting a bit more sunshine now. And then the battery provides energy at night, enabling the occupants to be energy self-sufficient for most of the year, especially during the summer months. Tenants are able to monitor their energy usage via the Tesla app. And again, on most of the schemes, on all of the schemes, we're going to have 3 years of post-occupancy monitoring, which will help us understand how these homes are operating, how people live with them, how much energy people are saving, what their bills are. And most importantly, we're learning lessons on every scheme, and we're able to refine the design going forward to the next scheme. So for example, some of the technologies may get smaller, we may need smaller plant rooms, we may be able to redesign the houses around those things. So every scheme we're learning as we go along. Slide 12 shows you a picture of the Tesla app, and you can see how the house is performing. If I showed you this picture in August, we would see that around 90% of the energy would be generated from the PV and battery. So the homes would be around 90% self-powered in the summer. This screenshot is from a week in November, where there's just some being drawn from the grid, some being drawn from solar, and some coming from the battery. So I think I'm going to hand back over to Mark now to talk about the current activity that we have on site and the plans that we have to develop the strategy and the development plan as we go forward.
Great, thanks, Carol, for that. So yeah, really interesting stuff there in terms of the developments which have been explained there. Oh, can everybody hear me? Sorry, I dropped out there for a second. Yeah, okay, thank you. Apologies, folks. Homeschooling, I think, I suspect it'll be people competing for bandwidth at the moment. So, okay, carrying on then. The Parker Helig development was handed over September last year, as Carol's indicated. Sort of lower profile, but two new homes in Acacia Road as well, which were handed over in December 2020, but they were converted from a former social services owned building, which the HRA has now taken on. Then 18 homes in Collier's Way 2 has been mentioned, due for handover basically now in next month. And also then the conversion of Bryn House to flats, and some interestingly some MMC pods there, passive house MMC pods, modern methods of construction pods, built off site, being brought onto that development site in just off Walter Road there. Again, funded by Welsh Government, that project. part of our COVID response and efforts to prevent homelessness as well. So lots of good examples there of schemes which are doing good things to support a variety of strategies, including our homelessness strategy. So all intrinsically linked, really. Works on site at Hillview at the moment up in Clace. Again, a large scale there, 25 new 3-bedroom homes there, and also 6 bungalows planned in West Cross, which is starting on site next month also. Further activity then in Clace on Creswell Road and Rydal Avenue, 10 new homes there as well. Acquisitions I've mentioned already in terms of our current and planned activity. So there's an ongoing programme of acquisitions there to increase the supply. Those who are familiar with Hill Edinburgh and Tufnell Place, also looking to deal with that via a master planning process. Some overdue investment in that area required to look as part of a regeneration of that area, as well as hopefully new build properties going on that site as well. Mentioned the development framework earlier on, plans to appoint a partner. It's quite clear that we won't be able to do this on our own. And we also want to stimulate the local economy as well. Reference to appointing a partner to help us build out some of the larger scale sites which are available to us as well. So we're picking that up, and potentially also some opportunities to acquire land for council housing, which is owned by the council itself under its general fund budgets. 10-year programme is what the aim is, direct build and partnership delivery. So ambitious plans there. Second half of the presentation is about decarbonisation. Now, we've deliberately done this in 2 halves. We mentioned the need for energy efficient homes in our new build houses, ambitions for 1,000 properties. Decarbonisation of our existing housing stock, however, is also a major ambition of ours, and shared with that is Welsh Government's ambitions to impact climate change and deal with domestic properties to assist with that. So whilst the More Homes programme is of course really important, we are the owner of over 13,000 existing properties which have been approved to the Welsh Housing Quality Standard. But as soon as we meet that target this year, then there's a new target around the corner, and that's going to be about decarbonisation of that stock. Presents some opportunities for us, but also some significant challenges as well, given the stock type and size. And Dave will talk about that a little bit in a moment. In terms of the Welsh Housing Quality Standard, which I just mentioned, lots and lots of work on energy efficiency improvements. Those properties already been done through the existing WHQS programme. We've spoken about combi boilers have been installed, far more efficient than coal fires which have been present in council houses back in the day, as it were. Improved insulation, upgrading to attic spaces and the like to make those properties more efficient, as well as then insulated render and basic things like double glazing and security doors. But this is a huge investment programme, and it can't be underestimated really, the level of task that this is in terms of dealing with a stock size that we have in Swansea. So just to put those elements in as part of the work programme to deal with WHQS as it is, we're talking over £110 million worth of energy efficiency improvements, which have already gone in those properties. So that's the level which we've achieved so far, which is significant. And in terms of the actual energy efficiency improvements, the standard assessment procedure, or SAP, is the measurement that is used for buildings. And we've already managed to improve the average SAP in our stock from what was on a scale of 0 to 100, 47 average, which is a band E in SAP terms, and moved that up to achieve the WHQS standard. Just beyond that, actually, at 67 for band D. Now, all of that is really good news, but as I've indicated, the Welsh Government ambition and ours are to significantly increase that further, and in fact move up to a band A on the SAP scale. but that won't be without its technical difficulties, and it won't be without its costs, and I shall pick those things up. Why are we doing it? Well, it's been said already, really, but I'll restate it. We are in the business of providing affordable housing, and therefore we want to reduce heat loss and energy inefficiency to create lesser fuel bills for our occupiers. More thermal comfort, health and well-being gains that go with living in a property that can achieve that for you. And also then the economic benefits then around training and development, and also stimulation of the local economy, which is obviously equally important, particularly with the advent of the 12 months that we've had and the post-COVID or post-pandemic recovery programme. House building and investment in housing will be a real cornerstone of that recovery plan, both locally and nationally. Moving on then, some pictures there of some buildings that you may recognise, and literally the before and after effect there, and really a legacy of the right to buy there as well, in terms of the properties then improved and left behind somewhat, whilst the authority has done what it can to improve the existing stock. So I've talked about insulation programs there, and there's some indications and examples in the pack about that as well, around the externally insulated systems that are being applied to those buildings. Wanted to talk then about the future decarbonisation policy. The situation is not clear as yet, but it is literally becoming clearer by the day currently. The UK Committee on Climate Change has set out its national policy in May 2019. And that was about reducing greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050 nationally. Welsh Government wants to set that bar higher and sooner. And its Better Homes, Better Wales, Better World report spoke about decarbonisation of the housing stock back in July 2019. With also then Welsh School of Architecture, who we've worked with directly on a number of projects, was commissioned to carry out a study, and that was published in August last year. And that report really is the basis of the Welsh Government stance and policy from here on in around decarbonisation of the existing housing stock. So those policy proposals then, in broad terms, talk about a new Welsh housing quality standard effectively. We will achieve the compliance with the standard by the end of this calendar year, which is extended because of the pandemic, but we will do that. But straight away, and hot on the heels of WHQS, is a new version, and underpinning that is decarbonisation effectively. Welsh Government plan to legislate for it, as they did with WHQS, to make it a legal requirement for stockholding councils and RSLs, the housing associations, to actually improve their stocks in accordance with the decarb compliant and requirements. And that statutory deadline is intended at this point to be December 2030, which is not too far away given the scale of the programme that we face ahead of us, really. So at that point, I'll pass to Dave Mayrick. Dave's our technical lead on housing investment in the existing stock. So Dave will talk through what this actually means in terms of practice. So Dave, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. I'm starting with slide 24, and the title is Decarbonisation Targets. There's a number of elements to the Welsh Government's proposed decarbonisation strategy. The first one being that they want to improve thermal efficiency of properties. Currently, under the existing Welsh Housing Quality Standard, our SAP target is 65, and that's an EPC, Energy Performance Certificate Band D. The new target is going to be 92, and Band A, which is the highest level of performance and is about 25% greater than the current building regulations for new build. Now, just to give some sort of context of how difficult it's going to be to achieve that, in the last 20 years, we've increased our points, our SAP points, from 47 to 67 over a 20-year period. We're now going to be expected to increase it a further 25 points in less than 10 years. So it's going to be a major undertaking. The next target that's been introduced is the environmental impact rating. Now, this is about the amount of carbon dioxide that's emitted from a property. It's not currently measured under the current Welsh Housing Quality Standard, but it will be in the new. And yep, you've guessed it, it's going to be the highest level of performance. It's going to be 96. So the revised targets for SAP and EIR are going to be incredibly difficult to achieve in our existing stock. It's difficult to achieve in new build. It's a whole lot more difficult to achieve it in existing stock. And what we're going to have to do is a range of thermal upgrades to the fabric of the building, but also use a whole range of renewable technologies to provide low carbon heating and electric generation for residents. But that's going to come at a very significant capital cost. The revised targets that Welsh Government are referring to is going to be known as SAP 92/EIR 96. And the definition of the approach is delivering affordable warmth and decarbonisation by the best balance between fabric measures, technology, and grid decarbonisation. Now, I'm referring here to how we're going to improve the fabric of our buildings and put renewable technologies in. The third element is grid decarbonisation. This is something that will rest with the energy providers, that they help the whole process along by decarbonising the existing grids. And that's going to be an incredibly important part of any future target, meeting future targets. The next strand of the strategy that they are looking to introduce is intelligent energy systems, which again is a technology that's basically will be capable of measuring and monitoring property temperatures, humidity, room usage, carbon emissions, and electrical demand within a property. The Welsh Government see this as an essential plank of their strategy to be able to see the true reflection of the reduction of carbon emissions and improvement of thermal upgrade. Now, Welsh Government are looking to us to actually implement this by the end of 22-23 to 13,500 properties, and they see this as a statutory requirement, a mandatory requirement that we will have to deliver very, very quickly. The next element of the strategy is introducing the concept of a property passport. So each social housing landlord will have a passport for each property it owns. And within that passport, there will be a schedule of repairs, maintenance, improvements that we've got programmed for the next 30 years. And on top of that, we will have all the decarbonisation elements that we're going to be required to deliver, also included on that list. And all of those works have got to be fully priced out as well. There's going to be costs have to be put against it. Now, Welsh Government are looking for that to be again introduced by the end of 22-23, while we're trying to deliver these decarbonisation programs. So it's going to be again a very tough ask. There's going to be a lot of technology behind this and systems that are going to have to be developed and introduced for us to be able to roll out this type of property passport. The next element of the strategy is programme accreditation. All the future decarbonisation work will have to be accredited to ensure that all the work is carried out to the right high standard. And that's going to be done through a quality assurance system, PAS 2035, which will control everything that we do in terms of the assessment, the modelling, the property designs, the procurement, and the coordination right the way through the delivery of the work and beyond in post-completion evaluations of how the measures are performing. There's going to be a major training implication for both local authorities to become accredited to PAS 2035. And it's not just us as a local authority and an in-house contractor. We will only be able to use accredited external contractors as well to deliver these programs. So those are the main planks of the future strategy. And so the next slide is slide 25, which is headed Decarbonisation Pilot Schemes. Since it's been clear from national and Welsh Government in 2019 of the future decarbonisation ambitions, we have, as officers, have tried to develop pilot schemes. And we've done so in collaboration with the Wales School of Architecture and also with Atkins Consultancy. Now, Carol has already outlined in some detail about the concept of houses as power stations, so I'm not going to repeat that. But the sites that we've been to date and carried out these pilot schemes are in Lonavellyn in Ganswyllt and Forddellyn in Croiceffin Park. If you look at the next slide, which is slide 26, it gives a list of all the sort of works that we did to those properties. But perhaps slide 27, an image is 1,000 words. The image on slide 27 shows the HAPS whole house approach and exactly the type of measures that we introduced into those properties to improve their performance. And they include insulated render, including increasing insulation in attic space, high performance double glazed windows, security doors, solar panels, battery storage, ground source air heat pumps on that particular site, new boilers, hot water storage, and heat recovery ventilation systems, because as we're improving the thermal efficiency of properties, we've got to put a corresponding amount of ventilation to stop issues or problems with condensation and humidity and black mold growth in people's homes. Now, the outcome of what we've carried out in Croiceffin Park and in Ganswyllt is typically the SAP ratings have gone up from SAP 12, Band G, up to SAP 95, that actually exceeds the Welsh Government targets, and the EPC is a Band A. And I suppose significantly for residents, the energy bills have reduced from about £1,300 a year down to about £400 a year, which is a significant saving for those residents. So what we're doing is all the information that we gather and develop on these pilot schemes, we're then going to be utilising that information and those lessons learned into developing our future strategy for the main rollout of the decarbonisation programme. Now, the next slides, 28 to 31, they're basically just showing elevations and the various bits of renewable technology kits that we've employed on those sites, and you can see that it's not just the thermal performance that we've upgraded, but it's the whole visual look of the street scene that these properties are located. Slide 30, for example, showing the front elevations of Lonavellyn. You know, you've got properties that are got a very contemporary look with all the thermal improvements and renewable technology that we are required to deliver in the future. If I go on to slide 32, and that's the Decarbonization Strategy that we as a housing service are adopting initially in this initial phase of the programme. And that's really to stick with the tried and tested, mainly what we've done in the past, which is enveloping properties and providing all the thermal improvement measures I've already described and Carol described as well. But we will integrate into that PV panels and battery storage, so residents will benefit from low carbon electricity generation, and obviously will contribute to reducing their future bills. In terms of how we roll out the low carbon heating solutions in the future, we've deferred that till post 2025 because we are waiting to see what sort of improvements the decarbonisation to the grid, what the energy providers, what solutions they're going to come up with, because what we don't want to do is take out systems that that could be decarbonised by just simply the grid upgrades. So a lot of the low carbon heating solutions, we won't be employing them till post 2025, and by then we're confident that the technologies will have developed and they will have improved, and we can just use those technologies that we're confident will have good performance in the field for our residents. While we're doing that, we're still going to be rolling out pilot schemes, the houses as power station type schemes. They will be mainly in rural locations, but we will be going to some urban sites as well. And again, this is a part of our learning process. If we can do small scale improvement schemes, we can use that knowledge as a part of our development, as a part of the wider rollout when we go past 24-25. There are lots of opportunities and challenges and risks to the council, which Mark, I think, is going to pick up on, which is going to start from slide 33.
Great, thank you, Dave.
Can I ask a question, please, Chairman? I've been looking through all my files and I can't see the slides. So where will I find them? I've been on city and county site and our site for the meeting today. I can't find the slides. They all seem to be incorporated into the main report.
Sam, can you answer that? Why, Chair?
The slides were printed with the agenda papers, Chair. So they're at the back of the report.
Yeah.
And if it helps, I think they were sent out on the 12th of March.
Okay, if it's right with you, Chair, is it okay to carry on?
Sorry, I think we're looking at about page 50 in terms of the agenda.
Sorry, yeah.
If I can help June, it's a photo of one of the sites and it says Swansea Council building better homes and decarbonisation. It starts there and then works down. The only thing we haven't got is slide numbers.
Yeah.
That is what was confusing me,
Yeah,
the slide number.
It's from there down it is. We're nearly down the bottom.
Okay.
I've got them in the agenda, but not as separate slides.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Mark, if you'd like to carry on.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry for
no, that's okay, no problem at all. Just to sum up then effectively, and thanks to Dave and Carol for their contributions. In relation to the decarbonisation side of things specifically, we've talked about our aims and objectives there around reduced fuel bills, which nobody will argue with, I'm sure, the more attractive and comfortable homes and improvements to well-being and health. The economic advantages potentially speak for themselves. Upskilling our workforce is a big part of this programme in terms of our local labour and our in-house labour resource as well within building services and training and opportunities there for the wider workforce. The principles of quality assurance as part of this is absolutely paramount, and we'll be working towards getting that in-house accreditation as well, so that the buildings can be signed off and sort of rubber stamped then as compliant. And similarly, the social benefits that go with that around training and development opportunities, and very much a case of trying to do the best we can with a minimum disruption to tenants as well as part of these programs. So with every opportunity comes a challenge, and undoubtedly the main one here is around cost. Significant level of investment required for both more homes and the decarbonisation of things, but the decarbonisation alone, we've estimated potentially £350 million worth of investment required. Now, that is eye-watering really, and those costs across Wales run into many more zeros. So we've got some challenges around that, which is around we're going to need more resource to deliver it around our staffing and training, which we're looking at now. Risks around the technology itself, and Dave's made a very good point, which is around not doing too much too soon, putting our eggs in one basket, as it were, then to find out a particular technology is not proven in the long run. So there is an element of watch and wait on that, whilst we look to go with more proven technologies that we know are robust for the long term and we can maintain at reasonable cost. And the greening of the grid is key to that as well. That it isn't all about renewable technologies. So we watch with keen anticipation really what the utility companies and the regulators can do around that for us, around the gas network, for example. So we are the biggest social housing provider in Wales. So that brings lots of benefits, but it also brings large costs with it as well. So we're very much wanting to talk to Welsh Government about their understanding of the ambitions, which we share, but there are some concerns regarding the overall costs, the implications for us as an authority and as a landlord. We want to be developing the design, procurement and delivery processes really as well to drive down the costs as part of that, because we all know with scale comes economy. So all of the housing providers nationally get on board with this agenda will help achieve that. Some risks just to close on then, there is going to be an issue around budgets, undoubtedly, and competing agendas as well, and we're communicating that through various channels to Welsh Government. Their support to us financially is going to be paramount, but they are very clear as well that existing financial streams that they provide to the authority through our major repairs allowance, for example, is going to be linked to delivery of this decarbonisation programme, and not necessarily just about stock size. So some principles that undermine our business plan we need to make sure are adhered to. So the Welsh Government, we feel at the moment, don't necessarily understand the true cost of this. And we will be with the other housing providers in Wales providing that lobby. So there are risks as well around sort of an overheated market, insufficient supply, and potentially then a surge in costs, whilst everybody competes for the limited amount of skills and expertise that may be around there. So our development of the local economy and the trades, as well as our own in-house methods there, helps us spread that risk. So the lobby to Welsh Government is going to be particularly important to explain our support for their agenda, but also for appeal for some realism around the costs which are involved here. So I'd like to thank Carol and Dave for their contributions this afternoon into making sure that the more complex issues here are explained perhaps better than I can. So ambitions, high ambitions, good delivery already, and some significant challenges ahead of us, but really exciting times for housing in support of our corporate climate change and climate emergency ambitions. So at that point, I shall close and hand back to the chair at that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and also Carol and Dave for an outstanding report, well written and very informative. Andrea, do you want to come in at this time?
Yes, please, Chair. And I echo the thanks to Carol and Dave and to Mark for covering what I think members will appreciate is very comprehensive and very detailed report on everything that's going on. It's very busy times at the moment. Just to add, really, that in terms of new homes, there has been exceptional cross-departmental working. In terms of the Swansea standard, efforts have been heavily concentrated on local jobs, local supply chains, reducing carbon footprints, benefiting tenants with high quality, high energy efficient homes, generating green renewable technologies and helping tackle fuel poverty, building sustainable communities with all homes built to a lifetime home standard. There's been close collaboration between housing and building services, working together, delivering, quite frankly, remarkable new developments. And I'm sure if the committee want to visit any of the sites, they would be more than welcome when restrictions allow. And I would highly recommend visiting Collier's Way 2, where we've seen our first 4-bedroom homes. And I defy anybody to look at them and say, those are council homes, because you really wouldn't. They're the best on the market that I know of. And I certainly, along with everybody else on the visit that we had prior to lockdown, all wanted to immediately have the keys handed over, and we all wanted to move in, Chair. So I think that speaks volumes. This, of course, is all to help address the significant demand for social housing that we know we have across Swansea. We still have about 4,000 people on our waiting list, so we desperately need to build new homes. In addition to that, Dave has very eloquently pointed out the Welsh Housing Quality Standard, the major investment, just under £500 million in our 13,500 council homes, which also creates significant improvements in terms of energy efficiency. In addition to upskilling our workforce that Mark referred to, I know the council are also working closely with local colleges to align their courses with renewable technologies, because we know that they are the jobs of the future. And finally, just to echo Mark's points around decarbonisation, presents a huge challenge to us. And I'll say that again, a huge challenge. It's significant in terms of funding, and timing will be of critical importance, because we know that we desperately need to concentrate our investments on new homes. And as Mark has said, an estimated £350 million in decarbonisation of existing homes is not a small drop in the ocean. With my role on the WLGA, representing the Housing Cabinet Members Network, we are working closely with Community Housing Cymru, who are representative of all housing associations across Wales. We're linking closely because of our shared common interest and our shared concerns in terms of decarbonisation of housing. I think nobody disagrees that we need to do this, but it is all about the timing. And as Dave and Mark outlined, there are other things outside of the council's control, such as the greening of the grid, which will also have a significant impact as to what works we need to do and the level of investment that we need to put in. So my thanks to everybody on the teams. The direct builds have been absolutely fantastic. And I really look forward to presenting future sites, more and more developments being delivered directly by our in-house workforce, who are doing a fantastic job, Chairman. So thank you very much for letting me come in on the closing remarks.
No problem. Thank you, Andrea. Right, we've got quite a few hands up, and I'll take them as in the order that they come in. Phil, you want to ask questions?
Thank you, Chair. Can I first of all thank Dave, Carol and Mark for their presentation. answered quite a few of my questions. The one thing, I'll start with houses as power stations, because Mike White, Paul Lloyd and myself visited the pilot scheme in Neath, and I got it, and I'm not sure if Martin was there as well the same day, I'm not sure. But that was an eye-opener. It's the first time I've seen them, and they're absolutely brilliant. One thing that that jumped out at me was that the battery station was in a building outside the house. And the reason they pointed out for this is because of the maintenance. If any work is to be done, they don't have to go in the house. But on the batteries, you've got to have an inverter to feed the house. And the question was asked, what happens if the battery runs down? Then that's topped up by the grid. So therefore, you've got to have a battery charger. So these are things that could go wrong where the rest of the house is working 100%. The actual machinery that's feeding them could break down the inverter and the charger, because the inverters don't last as long as the solar panels. I don't know if I heard it right, but did you say that we were not building any more passive houses? Nodded. Andrea's nodding, so I'll take that as a yes. That's great. Although I did go to the site, as Andrea's aware, and they were just as good. They were. One woman was glad that we went in to have a look around. She didn't make us any sandwiches, so I pointed that out in a day. Going on to Welsh Housing Quality Standard, we spent tremendous amount of money, and the photo, because we haven't got slide numbers, it was headed insulated render external fabric upgrade, and I'd like to thank you for coming along to Pond Lice to take photo of 2 houses. And if you ask 100 people which is the council house, 99% of them will get it wrong. But the question is, these houses now that we've spent the Welsh Housing Quality Standard, and we've got an SAP of 67 band D, but we've now have got to do retrofits. So does our policy take in, because obviously we can't do it all at the same time. It's impossible. So have we got anything set up that we will do this in the next couple of years, to them all, whether we do solar panels and whether we put in batteries, because these things will have to be done at some time. So that's what we should be looking at as a policy committee, because we are not scrutinised what you're doing. It's the policy from here on that we'll be looking at. We got everything in place, but are they in the right sequence then? I have got a couple of other things that I couldn't understand, because after all, I am a bit of a layman. Just 3 things that came to me: no thermal bridging, air tightness, and 4 air changes per minute. So somebody can explain that when you get to that. But otherwise, we moving a way forward. There are a number of ways to do houses as power stations, because when we went to see in Neath, we thought, oh, that's the way they've all got to be done, because in those houses there was no heat pumps. And then when I went up to, where did we go, Andrea? Where did we go?
Was it Craigavon Park?
Craigavon Park.
Yeah.
Because they got heat pumps. It was brilliant how each room is heated by itself independently. That was tremendous, and that would save a lot of money. And I think I got a couple of questions. If I think of any more, that I'll go through my notes. I'll come back later on, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Would like to answer his questions?
Can I come in just very quickly, because I know the technical questions I'm sure the officer will be happy to answer, but in terms of passive, we did acknowledge that this was the very first time that we were returning to council house building. We intentionally went for passive because it was the only type of house construction where you could measure the efficiency of the build, and therefore you could measure the performance of our first attempt. And during that pilot, it was always intended that we were going to have lessons learnt from that pilot. And one of the major lessons that we learnt was that we had to procure from Belgium, Czech Republic, island. And one of the things that we made a decision on very early on was that we wanted to concentrate on supporting local small to medium businesses, local supply chains, reducing the carbon footprint for those properties, because obviously, you know, there's the element of the efficiency of the home, but there's also the element of the efficiency of the construction of the home. And I think we were very much focused on the footprint of where we were getting our supplies from. And I'm sure that Carol or Dave or Mark can correct me on this, but my understanding was that within a 15-mile radius of Parker Helig, 90% of that was local supply chain, local businesses within a 15-mile radius. And that is exactly what we wanted to achieve, Chairman.
Okay, Chair, is it all right if I defer to Dave to cover the questions from Councillor Downing regarding this? I suppose the sequencing of the works, Dave, and then the technical points on thermal bridge air tightness and the air changes. Are you okay to pick that up? You are on mute, Dave.
You're on mute, Dave.
Sorry. In terms of upgrading those properties that we've already done the thermal upgrades, so we've enveloped the properties. We now will have to sometime in the future put the renewables in there to make them low carbon. Now, the way that we see it, those upgrades are going to happen probably post 2025. What we're aiming to do now is the remainder of the properties in our stock that we haven't thermally upgraded, we will do those first. Those will be our priorities. And while we're doing those properties, we will integrate the PV panels and the battery storage. We will have to come back at another occasion to do the low carbon heating solutions, because that is something that will come later on in our program. But so it means realistically, where we've already done enveloping work to properties and upgraded that thermal performance, the renewables will be added sometime after 25-26. In terms of cold bridging, if I can just try and use some sort of very basic thing. If you think of the insulation that we put around our properties as like a thermal blanket that we're wrapping around the properties, unless we detail it properly, there will still be weaknesses in that thermal performance. So it's not good just put in insulated render on a face of a wall. We also have to put the thermal insulation on the reveals and the heads to eliminate cold bridges. Okay, and that's what we mean by cold bridging. We want to make sure that the insulation measures that we put in place are consistent, and there's no weakness in the insulation performance that we apply. The next one was the air changes, and I'm assuming that was in relation to the heat recovery system. Carol, this is an area that you've been dealing with, the heat recovery ventilation systems. You're on mute, Carol.
Sorry. Yeah, so there's a target in building regs that sets out the number of air changes per hours required, and we, as the Swansea Stand, are aiming to improve on that, the number of air changes per hour required. So I can't recall off the top of my head what we've achieved on Parker Helig, but I can certainly dig that information out for you.
It's an answer to your questions, Phil?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks a lot.
Lovely.
That was air tightness as part of the thermal bridging as well, is it?
Air tightness is to reduce and minimize drafts that can potentially get into a property. So the more airtight you can make the structure, particularly this relates to the new build rather than than the thermal upgrades to the existing stock. But if you can eliminate as many drafts going into the property, that obviously assists with the thermal performance and potential heat loss. Carol, is there anything you'd add to that?
No, I don't think so. I think that's...
Could I add to that? Just a little detail which may be of interest, and my figures might be slightly out, but as I understand it, in terms of air tightness, passive house is 0.6 or thereabouts. Your standard building regs will be around 10, and our Swansea standard is coming in at around 3.4, 3.5. Yeah. So you can understand that the difference between passive and Swansea standard is very small, actually.
Okay, thank you. Next one, Mike White, you got a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, you mentioned, obviously, we talked about the proposed future decarbonisation standards, the strategy standards. You obviously said the Welsh Government were pushing for local authorities, register social landlords. How will this apply to private development companies? As you know, we've been tasked to have an additional over 17,000 properties in Swansea by the Welsh Government to accommodate the need for housing. Do you think that perhaps the Welsh Government might bring this in through the legislation of the Section 10 of the Planning Policy Wales Act to address this problem? And secondly, in regards to the HAP schemes, yeah, we did see the one in Millen Road, but I believe that was coastal. And I think there were indications there as well that there was a possibility they were looking at site in Swansea, in Lacha. Is this still moving forward? Would you know? Thank you.
Who's going to take the questions?
I can possibly answer the issue in relation to the private housing stock. I think Welsh Government's strategy is initially to concentrate on social housing in Wales. They feel that they've probably got greater control of being able to roll out decarbonisation programmes in social housing, and they are hoping that the programs that we deliver can be used to pump prime the private sector going forward, so that I believe that they're looking at a target 2035 for delivery of private sector housing.
Okay.
Do you want me to answer the bit about the coastal scheme, or? I think it's Pobl that did the active home scheme in Neath, and with regard to another scheme they're doing, I don't know if you're referring to the Gwynvine Farm scheme, which is a joint venture between Pobl and Coastal and Welsh Government, and indeed Swansea Council will also put land into that joint venture, and we'll be getting 12 of those homes out of that. So I'm not sure if that's the scheme you're referring to.
That might be the scheme, but you know, they did indicate when we were there that they were keen to come into Swansea to put some project together. In regards to the issue with the private development, it's up to the Welsh Government really to put new measures on them. Is it to when they are opening up a site for development for the properties, that the systems are actually put in place in these houses?
Chair, I think Martin's got his hand up.
Yeah, so I was just going to call in now, and thanks. Martin, I see you got your hand up. We would like a welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the answer to the question is to Councillor White. Yes, Welsh Government really need to consider toughening up significantly on the building regs for all developments. So the reality is the local authorities and RSLs are, I guess, doing it on a voluntary basis, or doing it because effectively there is grant to support those opportunities. those grants really are partially available to the private sector, and they are getting more and more involved, but generally in partnership with RSLs. The house building companies are quite a very strong lobbying group, and where discussions have taken place previously on tightening up the standards of thermal efficiency of new build properties, what the house builders will say, and in many cases justified, that it adversely affects the viability, and therefore there's a risk that many house builders won't develop in areas where land prices and house prices are suppressed. And there are concerns, certainly in Swansea, and certainly in some areas of Swansea and many parts of Wales, that will be the case. So I reckon it's trying to get that balance between, you know, that build cost and that resale value, and also linking in with the mortgageability and the fact that if people are paying less on energy costs, then effectively their disposable income will increase, and therefore in theory meaning that they would be able to get higher mortgages because they're paying less on an ongoing basis. So there's a challenge there, and we know Welsh Government are looking at that in terms of the building regs. Can I just touch on one other point? I think it was mentioned around the HAPS concept as opposed to the Homes as Power Stations HAPS programme. As it stands, the business case for Homes as Power Stations has yet to receive approval formally as a city deal project, and therefore no money is flowing under the umbrella of the HAPS project. Many of the projects we're talking about and saying it's a sort of HAPS demonstration or a pilot, they are all using exactly the same technology and exactly the same concepts. So it's all of the stuff that we are fitting to our properties, and Neath Talbot are as well, and others. So it's all using the same technology, and it's all under effectively a demonstration project of the Homes as Power Stations technology, but they're not yet formally approved as a Homes as Power Station city deal project, and therefore as of yet they're not able to draw money down from the Homes as Power Stations city deal project. Hopefully the business case will be signed off in the next 2 to 3 months by UK and Welsh Government, and then what we will see then is a formal Homes as Power Station programme, but our schemes will be part of that. It's not something extra, it's just effectively trying to finally align the two things. So hopefully that helps clarify that point as well.
Yeah, as I say, it's the same old chestnut. The private developers' profit comes first.
June, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I first of all thank Mark, Carol and Dave for such a comprehensive report with a lot of technical data, some that went over my head, I'm afraid. We've come a long way since we were allowed to build council housing, and I must congratulate the Cabinet member and the officers for where we are today. We've made tremendous strides. Collier's Way, which is in my ward, is really well accepted by tenants, and we learnt a lot from that report. As Cabinet member said, we had to wait sometimes because supplies were coming from overseas and they were delayed. And I'm glad now that we've taken on board the Swansea standards, and I think is it Nigel is now in charge of that, which is what he wanted, I think, from the beginning, because it did supply a lot of local jobs for local people at the time as well. So can I ask, do we have any figures, because that scheme has been going over 2 years now, on savings that have been made by tenants in the first phase of Collier's Way? And then I just want to comment, I look forward now to seeing the second phase and to the plans for Heel Emrys and Tudno, because things can only get better in the ward.
Thank you, June. Mark, you want to answer?
Thanks. If I could I'll defer to Carol on that one. Carol, can you just explain the monitoring that we're doing? I suppose the programme of ongoing monitoring that we've got in the new bills and how we're using that to try and measure some of the points that Councillor Burton has made there.
Yeah, as I say, we've got some monitoring equipment in Colliers Way 1, and we'll be in a couple of weeks fitting it into Parker Haylig, and then it'll go into Colliers Way 2 before the tenants move in. So we had a year's worth of monitoring on Colliers Way 1, which did show significant improvements on passive house schemes as opposed to standard, what you'd expect to see in a standard new build house. So the improvements were great. They wouldn't be as great as they would be on a scheme with PV and battery, obviously. The other difference with Colliers Way 1 is that there's a gas boiler in Colliers Way 1 as well. So you've got dual electricity tariffs there and dual standing charges to pay. So the bills will be lower than a standard property, but they'll be higher than our Swansea standard with the renewable technologies bolted on. So I haven't got the actual figures to hand. And part of the reason for that is that our monitoring was disrupted in Colliers Way 1 for about 9 months because of the COVID. So the Welsh School of Architecture were unable to get access to the properties, to go and read the meters, and to get the information from the tenants. The new monitoring systems going in will do it a lot more remotely, so we won't have to get access to the property to do that. But as these systems, as the technology's emerging and developing, we're able to do it more remotely. But the kit that was put into Colliers Way 1 requires Welsh School of Architecture to go back into the property to get the sensors out to draw down the data. So I will be able to report on that, hopefully, as soon as Welsh School of Architecture are able to go back and get access to the properties.
Chairman, if I could ask Carol as well, just to give a brief comment on the significant savings that have been seen at Craig-Kevin Park, going from off-gas properties to the HAPS model, which have been incredible.
Yeah, I think I did show one of the clips earlier, and I got more slides you can see that I can share with you, which shows in the summer months in Craig-Kevin Park, the homes were 90% self-powered, so they were only drawing 10% of their energy off the grid. So these homes, prior to the retrofit starting, had supplementary heating, they had oil, they had electric fan heaters going all the time. To see the savings there has been incredible. So as I say, only 10% of their energy was drawn off the grid for the summer months. Obviously, that hasn't been as effective in the winter months you'd expect to see, but over the course of the year, we do expect to see, significant reductions in tenants' bills. Obviously, it'll differ from household to household because they use their energy differently. Somebody may have a hot tub, an aquarium running all the time. So they're not going to be standard. We can't say everybody will save a certain amount of money, but certainly compared to what the residents were paying before, or compared to what they would be if they were living in a house that didn't have all that energy efficiency measures on the outside and the renewable technology, we expect to see really significant savings there.
Thank you, Carol. That's answered second one of my questions. Thank you, Jim. Paxton, see you got your hand up, mate?
I have indeed. Thank you, Chairman. Much appreciate that. Before I start, I'll just say that apart from being a city councillor, I'm also a community councillor on 2 councils, and both those councils have passed climate emergency motions, and we're both in the process of seeing what we can do with our community centres, because those are the only bills that we have, in fact, that we can affect directly. But certainly we've been out to consultants to find out what we can do. But I've been fascinated by what I've heard today, and I will certainly possibly be talking to officers again in office meeting just to find out what else I can learn in that respect. If I can come back a moment to this, being a bit sad, I went and looked at the budget for for the housing revenue account this year, and I noticed that what you were forecasting you're forecasting here in this paper a spend of about 350 million over the next 10 years, I think. Now, the figure in the budget was about 277 for the first 5 years, which only leaves a balance of about 70 odd million for the last 5 years. Does that mean the programme is going to wind down, or that you'll have finished? So what are the implications of those figures? And there's one other figure that worried me a little bit as well, in that you're looking over the next 5 years to be borrowing somewhere about £100 million. Current costs of 2% over 50 years, which is what we tend to be borrowing at, is going to put a charge of about 4 million a year onto the capital financing charges, which obviously reduces the amount that's available from the revenue account to come into the capital account for development work. Just a couple of questions there, how you intend to cover these and where we're going on those figures, basically. Sorry about the fact that they're figures, but I am sad like that, as I said. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Who's going to answer this question? Mark? Brave man.
I shall certainly try and do my best. I think Councillor there has made the point around the financial implications. I think that was one of the key thrusts of the presentation towards the end there, was around that cost. We're still working through what that's going to mean for us at the moment. Effectively, the costs at the moment exceed the level of borrowing that we would be needing to do prudently, and therefore this is early days of a programme. The Welsh Government are looking at a consultation process over the summer period here in 2021, prior to the standard actually being put on the statute books. So part of our lobby will be exactly that as a sector, which is to say we aim to drive down costs as part of this. But even an organisation the size of ours, with the borrowing power it will put significant strain on that business plan. And we're under under legal obligation to keep the HRA solvent, and as such we want to be in a position where we can get a programme of works together which is affordable, and that's why we need to drive down those costs at the moment. So you're right to point that out, and that will be a key point of our lobby, both locally and as a housing sector, really, that those costs need to be recognised, and that borrowing, whilst there is headroom available to us, it obviously needs to be paid back over a period of time, and so forth. So those figures aren't exact, but you're right to point out the financial, I suppose, the gravity of the situation that we face ahead of us, and that will be communicated back to Welsh Government.
Okay. Andrea?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, if I could just add to what Mark has said as well. It's a complex thing, the housing revenue account and the business case, the business plan, and it is very intricate, and it doesn't reflect any future grants that we might access. It doesn't reflect the fact that we can now access social housing grant, as well as housing associations, councils can now access that money. So it's not cut and dried, but I think the point is made that, as Mark has said, that we will be looking to Welsh Government for additional funding to meet this additional ask, because otherwise our priorities will be split between not only finishing off Welsh Housing Quality Standard and delivering new homes, but we also have an obligation to meet the backlog of maintenance and repairs, which is an ongoing requirement of us to deal with emergency repairs and standard repairs that we have across our estate as a landlord, to look after our tenants. So it is very intricate, it is very finely balanced, but one thing that we will never do is borrow over our capacity and put the HRA into any considerable kind of debt, because that's illegal, effectively. So we do very cautiously retain a level of reserves that is appropriate, and we're always very mindful and very careful whenever we borrow that we don't borrow over our capacity to do so.
Thank you, Andrea. Dave,
Can I just come back a second on that, because obviously I understand the situation and what you're saying, but in terms of what you're doing and what you've achieved, I think it's important really to try and keep that going as best we can. And I think that's the reason why I'm raising the finance side of it, because obviously that's at the heart of it, and the more grants that you can get from Welsh Government, obviously the better, but let's see what develops from there. That's my only concern, basically.
Thanks, Paxton. We do share that concern. Thank you.
David, do you still want to come in?
All I was going to say is the first call on our future maintenance budget for our existing homes will be to maintain the Welsh Housing Quality Standard as it stands. So that's going to be the first draw on our budget. The second bit, and this is what refers to the £350 million, we've built up some in-house costs. What typically the fabric improvements and the renewable technologies will cost us typically. And we've extrapolated that out to look at that figure of £350 million. It's very much an approximation, but it's to give some sort of scale of what the future holds. I should add to that, the decarbonisation of the grid is going to be a huge factor in that. And if we can get low carbon heating without the need for wholesale changes to the existing piped gas systems we've got going into homes, that figure could possibly come down. But it's very, very early days. We haven't even got the guidance yet to scrutinise. But the £350 million was just a figure that we built up based on typical costs to achieve the SAP 92 and EIR 96 and extrapolated that out against our stock. So I just thought I'd clarify that point.
Thank you, Dave. I see Phil has got his hand back up.
Yeah, can I first of all tell Paxton not to worry, that's all we're going to do is refer it to the officer in charge of the dark arts. So, through the presentation, we mentioned 19 jobs per million investment. Could you just, well, I suppose Andrea knows this, how many apprentices we've taken on since the start of Welsh Housing Quality Standard, and how many we envisage taking on from now on? And secondly, I just want to touch on the city deal. The scheme in the city deal is around 500 million, but a lot of that is on the private sector. So, and like Martin said, this money hasn't started dripping down yet for the HAP scheme. But when it does, I'm wondering then, if developers come along and they use this scheme, then they would have to build to the standards of the scheme. So it would be interesting to see when this kicks off, how many developers will, I wouldn't say cherry pick, but try and use some of this city deal. But that would be the benefit, because I think what we did speak about when we went on site was an SPG for the planners with regards to houses at power station, and that was sort of a no-go, simply what Martin was saying, that the price of houses would go up quite a lot, and then the developers wouldn't be able to sell them because there's another developer doing ordinary houses for say 30,000-40,000 less. So it would be it wouldn't be a fair market then. But once the city deal starts dripping down, and I'm waiting to see what's going to happen on the private sector then.
Thank you, Phil. Andrea, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll come in initially, but I'm sure Martin would like to add more, particularly around the city deal, and probably knows quite a lot more about the apprenticeships, in fairness, than I do. But my understanding, I haven't got the figures in front of me at the moment, but we're looking to recruit 17 apprentices this year. I think overall, off the top of my head, we've got roughly about 76 apprentices across the piece. This isn't just in connection with construction in terms of Welsh Housing Quality Standard, but also connected to our education capital programme as well. And they are enjoying, the apprentices that I've spoken to have been really, really pleased and delighted to be involved in the new development sites, particularly because it's live site experience that they didn't really, some of them didn't know they were going to have the opportunity, because going back a few years before we started on our new build programme. And so talking to them, they've been really pleased. It's working really well because we know there are trade skills gap across the region, and in fact across Wales there's trade skills deficits, and so in effect we're growing our own talent, and that's working extremely well. But in addition to the apprentices, and I don't know if Martin or Carol wants to come in on this, but we also look at people who are long-term unemployed in the communities, and the community benefits that clause is really important to us, and wherever we can, we do employ people from the local community as well. And I know that housing associations do the same thing, and I believe that the contracts are the same for private developers as well. So it's an excellent way of us tackling long-term unemployment, bringing jobs to the city and effectively to the region as well. But I'll hand over to Martin, who I'm sure can expand a bit more.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the general rule of thumb tends to be that apprentices, or and as you recall, the council has a beyond bricks and mortar strategy, and it tends to work around about 52 person weeks per £1 million. That's the way it's always explained. So effectively, you're getting one apprentice or one trainee or one disadvantaged individual back in employment for every £1 million you spend. So of the 19 additional roles, one of those would then be an apprentice. Now that's the rule of thumb, and very often that number is exceeded. It's significantly exceeded if the council is the developer because of the numbers we have. So just to give you some indication of numbers, the problem with apprentices is because they work on a range of projects to be able to complete their portfolio, they're not employed solely on new build or WHQS, they're employed on the complete totality. But we're close to 250 apprentices being recruited since the scheme recommenced. They now make up over 2/3 of the building services workforce. So effectively 66% plus of the people now working in that trade environment have come through the council's in-house apprenticeship programme. In the last 5 years, we're probably approaching 75 apprentices specifically recruited on housing activities. Biggest apprenticeship scheme in Wales, certainly certainly in terms of house building and public sector, probably competes with any other sector of industry as well. So a big plus. As part of the Homes as Power Stations funding, which as I mentioned isn't online yet, there is a key aspect of that supply chain development and an alignment with the skills agenda to make sure that we have the adequate number of people trained up to install and maintain then this equipment that's going to be built into these properties. Nigel Williams has already made contact with local colleges and is already arranging training for all of our building services, plumbers and electricians, so they will be in a position to maintain any equipment that we are installing. And there's also the opportunity in time for us to offer those services to others. So there is the wider benefit to the community by these projects in addition to the homes. It is the skills, it is the inward investment, and it is that job creation and growth of the supply chain as part of this project delivery. And what we'd like to do is to ensure that as many of those jobs are created and retained in the Swansea Bay area.
Thank you, Martin. Any further questions? None? Well, I would like to thank the Cabinet member and the staff for all their hard work, and not just for presenting this today, but turning these strategies into bricks and mortar. It's going to certainly help people out of eating poverty, and secondly, definitely reduce our carbon footprint. So I think we will go for the recommendation. And just remember, I think it's like this project is just like buying a computer. You can buy it today, but you're going to have loads of updates going into the future. So again, I'd like to thank you all for that, and that we will note the strategy as the recommendation, and I'm sure we will see this on a future date as the updates come in.
Chair, may I just come in there if I can? Yeah, the tricky thing with this area, isn't it? It's such a large piece of work, as has been seen by the comprehensive presentation and the extent of the questions.
Yeah.
But if the committee wanted any of the specific elements, because it's not intended to formalise this any more than it is already, I suspect that once we get the Homes as Power Station business case fully signed up and over the line, there may be an opportunity, there will be an opportunity if the committee wish to do so, to come back with that as a specific piece of work, which is a new policy area because it currently doesn't exist. But if there are any other elements of what we discussed and explained today where committee wishes us to go away and look at, developing a discrete policy aspect over and above what's already there. As Councillor Downing reminded us earlier, it's about developing new policy, and whilst the updates have been, I'm sure, hugely valuable, any areas of policy development that you want us to bring back, we'd be happy to do so in due course.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Phil?
Yeah, the Welsh Housing Quality Standard is sort of finishing this December. Well, we should be finishing by this December. Do you envisage Welsh Housing Quality Standard 2 to come from the government, which then will change all this policy more than likely?
Mark?
I think the simple answer is yes, and we expect decarbonisation to be, a central part of that. So certainly Dave and others have been guiding us for a while that this most definitely is likely to form the new iteration of Welsh housing quality for the 2020s and into 2030 as well. I would expect. So yes, in answer to your question.
Okay, thank you, Mark. If that's the end of that, we'll go on to agenda item 5, which is economy, environment, and the work plan.
Thank you, Chair.
If you officers would like to disappear, because I know you're going to be working hard behind the lines. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chair, to you and the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Sam. Let's go.
Yes, Chair, we have that at, I'm not sure whether Martin can add a bit more detail in relation to which officer will present the report at the meeting in April. And is it as it says on the work plan? Is there any other sort of facets to it as well?
Yeah. Can I come in on the work plan? We did, when I first took over as chair, we had the bus stops policy. Can we put that back on the agenda, please, in the work plan? It's a citing of what I'm looking at as well. What I'd like to look at is that the bus company will put a bus stop in some real awkward places. I'll give you 2 for instances. One on the corner of Conway Road and Pendergethin, and the other then is on Mansleton Road. And I'm sure it's not just in this ward here, but it's also in all other wards throughout the city. So if I can have that put on the agenda for the work plan in the near future, please. Martin, you want to come in? You're on mute, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, obviously we can clarify the exact detail beforehand so we can get the appropriate officers there. In reality, the council, as far as I know, doesn't install many new bus stops. They may install bus shelters at existing bus stops, but we can pick that up in due course. The point I was going to make was around the officers. Yeah, so Chris Howell and Jeremy Davis would be attending the March session, and just double checking whether there would also be a need for somebody from the biodiversity team. But the main aspect of the April session, so did I say March? April session will be around the the maintenance of green space and open space by our parks team. So this, if you recall, was, I think, came out of during the initial phases of lockdown. There was very little grass cutting, there was very little activity going on, and whether or not that should become more of the norm to aid biodiversity as opposed to formalised green spaces. So that's very much around the current programme of maintenance and where there are opportunities on verge management, verge maintenance to get the balance right between formalising maintenance and keeping areas that are more perhaps appropriate for biodiversity. I was going to ask Chair if possible. We've also got tree policy listed, but I think that's a significant piece of work in its own right. What I was wondering, or was going to suggest, is if we can deal with the biodiversity aspect at the next meeting and then bring a draft tree policy to a subsequent committee meeting, just so we can make the best use of your time as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with you that if it's such a big policy, yeah, split them up. Mike, you want to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, going back to, we did have a discussion through this group a few years ago. I think Phil will remember as well, as Phil was Chair, he's Vice Chair, on the ANGS, Martin, areas of natural green spaces. But that sort of was tagged on as well with the tree policy, which we did do a lot of work on that with Martin Bignell. Yeah. So I don't know whether there's anything from that we discussed then. I think it was about 4 years ago, Phil, something like that, wasn't it? Where we was dealing with this. So I don't know whether there's been any further progress, Martin, from what we looked at then.
Potentially, I'm not aware of the ANG stuff, but on the tree policy, there is a number of formalised policies already, particularly embedded through the planning process. The aspect I was intending to bring back to members is more around, as part of the climate change action plan and our offsetting targets and the intention to plant a significant number of new trees, is how do we identify the locations? How do we earmark and get a list of prioritised sites? So when grant monies, for example, or monies become available, we've already got a programme rather than having to consult on a site-by-site basis each time additional monies come along. So I think the management of existing trees, whether that be TPOs or whether that be through other formalised measures, they're very much already embedded. So we don't intend to suggest unravelling that. This is much more around the opportunities to increase the tree cover of the council.
Yeah, I know that Richard Pullman has been one of the officers that obviously that we've been talking to, because we've done some tree planting in Havard Park. And I know Richard was very keen. He's working, I gather, alongside Martin to identify, especially within our parks areas. So whether they might have got some lists already drawn up across the city, I don't know. Maybe worth perhaps looking into.
Yes, Chair. It will be. I think at the moment it's very much held by individual officers, and I think that there would be a benefit of having an overall policy where that's set out in terms of how we prioritise areas and how that then gets us towards our target of offsetting climate change emissions for 2030. So that's very much the environmental angle is where we're coming from, rather than the statutory and legislative angle that we think we've already got covered through the existing sort of planning process and other policies as well.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Phil, you want to come in?
Yeah, well, first of all, on the bus stops, I was going to ask, have we got a policy on bus stops or bus shelters? If not, then we would have to introduce a policy and take it to Cabinet for them to adopt it. As on the bus stops, on the tree policy, Mike is quite right. When we had a Cabinet Advisory Committee, we spent between 10 and 12 weeks, not every session. I think it was like about an hour of each meeting to look at it. So there is a policy somewhere. I don't know whose desk it's in, but we did have one. I don't think it went to Cabinet though, but it is there somewhere, Martin, if you twist the right arms.
Yeah, well, we've got hold of that draft. You are right. Both of you are right. It as far as I can find, it never actually went to cabinet to be formally endorsed. So it's very much a draft policy. Clearly, there's been updated changes since all that work was done by the Cabinet Advisory Committee at that stage. So it's very much a case of, but to be honest, the size of the document when I looked at the draft a few weeks ago was so large. I think some of it we need to break it up into, as I said, keeping things like, for example, anything to do with the planning process separate. But what I'm happy to do is we'll bring the draft. It'll probably take a couple of goes, but we'll bring the draft to the committee, have your initial thoughts, go away, redraft it as a final version, and then look to bring that back later this year. But I think that's reasonable to get that done within the coming year's work programme.
I think why we looked at it wasn't to do with the planning side of it. It was to have something on the City and County of Swansea's website so that the public, if they had problems with a tree, whether it's the neighbour, whether it's coming on there, they could go on to the Swansea Council website, pick up the heading, and that will explain what they can and cannot do. That was the plan behind it anyway.
Yeah, I can remember it. June, you could what?
Yeah.
Comment?
I don't know whether Paul Lloyd can comment on this, but on bus stops, would it be worth looking at it in Paul's scrutiny subcommittee before any policy comes to this committee? And looking through the work plan, I see we've got a grey fleet policy and a green fleet policy. Can these be incorporated into one report, or are they going to be very long reports, Martin, that we need separate sessions?
Martin, I'll leave you answer that. I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, they're two distinct documents because terminology, isn't it? Green fleet effectively is the council's own purchased and hired fleet. Grey fleet is individuals using their own vehicles for council purposes. Depending on the length of the reports, I'd be quite happy to look to try and incorporate that in a single session. They will be the same officers bringing them forward by and large. So yeah, happy to look at that and see whether we can deal with that in one committee meeting rather than separate it out into two.
Yeah, I do take on point what Paul put on the chat about the traffic commissioners to give them permission to cite the bus stops. So I take that on board.
Can Paul comment on whether it's worth looking at it in scrutiny?
I've got my hand up there, Chair. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at the moment, we just got an issue in our ward whereby First Cymru has applied and to the traffic commissioners and got permission to cite the bus stop. No consultation with the neighbours or anyone else, and you can imagine what's happening. So yeah, I mean, we do need to look at this and perhaps what influence we can have over that. There's obviously no consultation, and that's where it goes wrong. But when it goes wrong, guess where it comes back to?
Okay, Paul, thanks.
Thank you,
Martin, or legal might be, surely this would come before the PDC, before it would go over to scrutiny, because they've got nothing to scrutinise otherwise, do they?
It's a tricky one, Chair. I welcome the legal advice on this one as well, because the reality is, you know, this isn't the policy the council can set. The council can make requests in terms of to be a consultee, but you know, it isn't within the decision making of the council. It's clearly decision making of the traffic commissioner, subject to bus company application. So happy to take it away and consider the options, but I'm not quite sure that it is within the remit of the PDC. I'd say happy to consider it and come back at our next session and give you a bit further information on it.
Yeah, okay. Anything else, ladies and gents? Sam?
No, nothing to add, Chair.
Okay, the next meeting then is on the 22nd of April, and it's management and maintenance of open space. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Okay, thank you,
And
Chair.
see you next month.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers,
Chair.
everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.